See, if it can happen on Mars to the degree that we're up there looking at nothing but the debris. Headlines saying basically it is happening here, it is happening now. People just don't like that. It's scary.
Well, if the people who don't like it just find the solution is to turn off the TV, then it's going to continue happening.
Which I might add, they do a lot of that.
Oh, sure.
When people see something that either scares them or they don't agree with because they're scared, that's what they do.
There's always a rerun of Friends you can watch instead.
That's right.
Yeah.
Exactly correct. It's just the nature of the human to want to reject that kind of material. And so I take... Is that one of the reasons that Ed Dames will talk about some very dire things he sees, like starvation, for example, mass starvation.
Yeah, the doctor has been talking about that for years. Yeah.
Climate change, that kind of thing. Radiation from the sun, all kinds of stuff like that. Anyway, hold tight. We're at the top of the hour, all right? Lyn Buchanan is my guest. This is Coast to Coast AM. We're talking about what may be to come.
This part of the show? Listen online with Streamlink. Log on to coasttocoastam.com. With Art Bell. Call the Wildcard line at area code 775-727-1295. The first-time caller line is area code 775-727-1222. To talk with Art Bell from east of the Rockies, call toll-free at 800-825-5033. From west of the Rockies, call 800-618-8255. International callers may reach Art by calling your in-country Sprint access number, pressing option 5, and dialing toll-free 800-893-0903. From coast to coast, with Art Bell.
Those are the relevant phone numbers, and shortly we're going to begin taking calls for Lyn Buchanan. So if you have a question about remote viewing, some of the cool stuff you've heard about tonight, some of this has been actually very new stuff, then you can get on the phone and I'll connect you with Lyn shortly. Just a little word here. I was holding this. I was thinking tomorrow night. I'll hit it tomorrow night too. But this is so non-trivial. Something I usually don't release on a Saturday. But sure enough, it came out in Nature and hit the news everywhere. CNN, everything else. The headline: Climate change extinction, a threat to 25% of animals. A quarter of land animals and plants. A quarter! 25% could be driven to extinction by another 50 years of global warming, scientists said today. The start warning follows a major study into the likely effects of greenhouse gas emissions on 6 biodiversity-rich regions around the world. It found that by 2050, even a medium level of climate change threatened to wipe 1 million species off the face of the planet. Between 15 and 37% of species could eventually become extinct, research found. Averaging out findings resulted in the predicted disappearance of a quarter of land, animals, and plant species. Higher levels of global warming led to a third of species becoming extinct. That's really sobering stuff. That's out in nature today, and it bears directly, I guess, on what we're talking about. So, Lyn Buchanan, we'll be right back. I wonder, Lyn, whether you have looked at this enough to know whether what's happening to Earth right now is some variation of what happened on Mars.
I don't believe it is. I think that was more of a natural thing. But we really didn't look into causes to find that out.
Well, I mean, it's such the atmosphere was virtually stripped away. The water, such as it was above the planet, if it's there, is still there, is below the planet, or whatever. I mean, that's extremely radical, and there's no large life walking around anymore. So something pretty traumatic had to have happened, I guess.
It could have been the same thing that happened, when they think the planet Venus is what stopped the Earth's rotation that one day in biblical history. And that may have stripped an atmosphere away. I don't think there's a way to know scientifically.
How do you feel about the Bible and then what you have remote viewed in the past? Have you ever tried to verify through remote viewing anything that the Bible tells us happened?
Oh yeah, and in fact there's a lot of absolute truth that's, much of it is masked with religious terminology or with religious interpretation, and yet the truth is still there. And the Bible is a good book. It's a really valuable book, and has a lot of information that we need and that we can go by. I wouldn't write that book off in a long time. It has a lot of potential.
I've had some reason to speculate on in the past if I ever got a chance to travel in time, and my answer has always been the same. To the life of Christ, I would want to go to the time of the life of Christ and verify it for myself. And, have you ever ventured forth in such a question?
I was given a task one time. I had been doing bad guys and accessing them mentally, doing plans and intentions, and as well as personality assessments, which is a deeper access. And I had gone in to complain because, it was really tearing me up doing all these bad guys, because you mentally associate with them. I went into my boss and I said, I can't take this anymore. Give me Mother Teresa or Moses the Clown or something, but I can't take this anymore. And his answer was, you're a soldier, suck it up, do your job, and get out of my office. And I guess about a week later, I got a target, which was just a personality profile type thing. And I went into it to do my job, and the minute I started the session, I got this sudden awareness, and I said to my monitor, whatever evil you think this guy did, he didn't do it. You targeted me with the wrong guy. And we went on through the session, and finally at the end of the session, by the end of the session, I was just glowing inside. I'd never met any person like this, and I actually accessed this person's mind, and just came up, the experience was a life-changing experience. And of course, when the session was over, he said, okay, well, let's see if there are any further questions. had been my target that day. And that one session was a large turning point in my life. I think it was Courtney Brown one time said, you know, you met Christ at that level. What did he tell you? What did you know? And the only answer I could give was, Courtney, you met Christ at that level. He doesn't have to say it. He doesn't have to tell you anything, you know. And I mean, it was a real life-changing experience.
All right. Remember you told me Saddam Hussein featured himself as someone who would be running the world?
Yeah.
How would you know whether the mind you had read was somebody deeply delusional or the real McCoy?
I think when you get to the depth of his delusion, it becomes the real McCoy. I think you're asking, though, you know,
How would you tell the difference?
how would you tell that God doesn't want him to run the world?
Well, no,
That wouldn't be gained in remote viewing. That would be gained by just observing what goes on.
But when you're dealing with having the mind of Christ,
Right.
I just wondered how you know it's the mind of Christ versus somebody who's delusional and believes it's a fairly common delusion, actually.
I see. Because that was the target.
And you don't miss the target?
You do at times, but that one I didn't miss. No. I stress a lot of times the need for training and the need for control and the need for track records and the need for databasing and so on.
Yes.
I stress it sometimes to the point where people say, oh, well, he's just trying to make a living because he's a remote viewing teacher. But that's not it. I make a very good living aside from the teaching. The need for training and the need for establishing with hard targets that you can faithfully, you know, as often as humanly possible, hit the target and describe it.
Yes.
That need is there. It's part of the training, and it has to be. I see people who go for a one-day course and workshop in remote viewing, and they come away and they immediately go out and try to save the world by finding missing children and all that. And in the process, they tend to destroy themselves as well as everyone else.
There would be no way to meet with the mind of Christ and have that experience and not have it profoundly affect your entire spiritual belief system and life and I guess everything, huh?
I don't think there would be, no. I was not doing a plans and intentions session, which is a deep one where you get the actual thoughts and everything. I was just doing a personality assessment on this, and so it was actually a shallow one, and it affected my entire life from that point on.
Profoundly.
Profoundly, yes.
Ed had an encounter with Lucifer. I suppose you heard about that one, huh?
Yeah, I heard about that one.
You, on the other hand, very interesting. Wow. There have been some fearful encounters that you've had, because that's a word you used here, is fearful. And so how do you handle that? I mean, when you're in a remote viewing session and you encounter something fearful, is it a very palpable kind of fear? Do you fear it as though there were a dangerous animal stalking you, you know, the hair up on the back of your neck, or what?
Oh, yeah. And there are degrees of remote viewing, and there are degrees of sight contact which go along with that. If you have what's called a perfect sight contact or the bilocation experience, and you have one of these experiences, then you can, it's extremely real, and you would have the same fear and actually the same trauma as though it happened to you for real. Fortunately, most remote viewing sessions do not go into bilocation, and so you still have that detachment, and you can still
guess, then, for a remote viewer to actually be in a place?
Yes. Let me give you an illustration. One of my students had been wanting to have this bilocation experience, and I kept saying, "You're not ready for it. You're not ready. Just be patient and all that." But he kept being impatient. Someone gave him a target of a man drowning in mud, being swept away in a mudslide. And I was working with a group of students over on one side of the room, and the student ran over and said, "You've got to come over here quick." Somehow he had bilocated into that person and was struggling for breath. He couldn't breathe, and it got to the, I knew what was going on because I had seen the bilocation experience before, and I thought, and I'm not proud of this, I thought, okay, buddy, you wanted this, then, we're going to let you do this, and I'm going to pull you out when it's going too far. And right at the last minute, I pulled him out. He had come to the point where he knew he would not live through that session. And he had come to the point in that session where he had accepted his own death as being imminent within seconds.
Do you believe, had you let it go, do you believe it would have brought physical death?
Oh, no. He would have passed out completely, and then the fading would have broken him from the target, and he would regain consciousness. However, there are other things. I have come out of sessions with broken rib and things like that. So there are those dangers and possibilities.
How, pray tell, does one get a broken rib in a remote viewing session?
I like to think, I'm very practical, I like to think that when I access the person who just happened to be breaking it in an accident at the time that I was accessing him,
yes,
and broke his rib, I like to think that my muscles tightened up to the place where my muscles broke my own hip. I am not into the magic stuff, and so I look for logical, plausible explanations on all of this.
you're saying this happened to you, and the way you dealt with it mentally was to just sort of say it's the power of the mind.
Yeah.
If the power of your mind can break your rib, then maybe the power of your mind could keep your